Hello and welcome to today's Security Plus study session. Today we're going to be going over a few different encryption algorithms, and we're going to compare and contrast the types of encryption algorithms that you're going to see on the exam. So let's first start with symmetric key algorithms. Now, symmetric key algorithms are algorithms that share one key for both parties. So both users would be able to share encrypted data, each using the same key to encrypt or decrypt the data. In this way, the encryption algorithm works by sharing that key usually ahead of time or through a more advanced technique that we'll talk about later, in which an asymmetric key can be used to create a symmetric key. The main problem with symmetric key encryption is that key, the initial key, has to be shared through a secure channel. So how is that accomplished? Normally that means that the key needs to be shared ahead of time. Otherwise, users wouldn't be able to have a secure session using that same key, because there would be no way for both parties to have access to that key initially, unless you use a supporting technology like public key infrastructure, or a technique using an asymmetric algorithm like Diffie-Hellman, which can use an asymmetric algorithm to create a symmetric key. With symmetric key encryption protects data confidentiality, but it doesn't protect data integrity, because anybody who has access to that symmetric key can encrypt or decrypt the data. So you're not authenticating anyone, you're not protecting the integrity of the data, but you are protecting the confidentiality of the data. So if an attacker were to intercept a message in transit that was encrypted using a symmetric key, that attacker would not be able to decrypt that message unless they had access to that symmetric key. At the same time, the recipient of the message would not be able to identify who encrypted the message. Anybody who had access to a symmetric key would theoretically be able to encrypt that message. Think of symmetric key algorithms much like a house key. So the owner of the house can create as many copies as they want of their house key and give those out to whoever they want to have access to their home. Anyone with access to the house key, or anybody who has a house key, can enter the house. And the user is not going to know, or the house owner is not going to necessarily know who accessed their house if they've given their key out to multiple people. Say they come home, their door is unlocked. They would have no way of knowing who actually unlocked the house if they've given their key out to multiple people. So with symmetric key algorithm, we're going to talk about a few different types. First, we're going to talk about is Data Encryption Standard, or DES. This is a very old block ciphers created originally in the 1970s. It uses a 64-bit block with 8 bits saved for parity. So really the block size is only 56 bits. Because the block size is so small, DES is very susceptible to brute force attacks. It does not take very long at all for a brute force attack to be successful to retrieve, to crack a DES encryption. This means that DES is deprecated. It means it should no longer be used. You may find it in a few areas, but it's very easy to crack and it provides almost no protection. We're going to talk about a couple different types of ciphers here. DES is a block cipher, and block ciphers work by encrypting data in blocks, as opposed to a stream cipher, which will encrypt bits as they enter a stream. So for streaming video, if you were to watch this study session live, you would be streaming the video. if that video stream was encrypted, you may be using a stream cipher. It probably is. With a block cipher is very good for data in which you know the size. So for stored files and folders, block ciphers are commonly used. And there are some types of ciphers that allow you to use block ciphers like a stream cipher. We go into that in depth in the Security Plus course we have at Cybercraft. But let's continue with this review session first. So because DES was vulnerable to brute force attacks, a new technology came about that was designed to enhance DES, basically, to allow DES to change DES in a way to make it more secure. And that's where triple DES came about, or 3DES. It's abbreviated as 3DES, but it's usually spoken as 3DES or triple DES or triple data encryption standard. 3DES is normally how it's said. So 3DES was an attempt to make DES more secure. And basically what it does is it uses DES, but it goes over the same process 3 times. So it performs the same process as DES for encryption, but it does it 3 times, and each time it uses a different key. So multiple keys are used, and the whole process is done 3 times in order to get one encryption key. So because of that, clearly it takes 3 times longer, which is pretty easy to assume, and it still suffers from a small key size. So because the key size never really changed, you're just doing the whole process 3 times, there's still some inherent vulnerabilities with 3DES. Again, it's still a block cipher, but many organizations consider 3DES unsecure. They don't consider it a good replacement for DES. So instead, what most organizations use is the Advanced Encryption Standard. Now, back in the late 1990s, the United States government came up with a contest to hold a successor, or to come up with a successor to DES. So they had a bunch of different algorithms submitted to the government, and then this was hosted by the National Institutes of Standards and Technology, NIST, and NIST compared all of these algorithms, and out of all of the algorithms, one of the algorithms, Ringdale, was chosen as the successor. Okay, so the Ringdale algorithm, which is named, it's a hybrid name between the creators Joan Damon and Vincent Ridgman, was selected as the winning algorithm in this contest. And that contest had many different other viable algorithms, one of which was Twofish, which eventually created Blowfish. But anyway, this algorithm is used for AES. So when people say AES, or they're going to encrypt with AES, they're really using that Ringdale algorithm, but it's mostly just said as AES. So AES is a very strong encryption algorithm, supports block sizes or key sizes of 128, 192, and 256 bits. And it's the de facto standard for the United States government, and it's widely used outside of the U.S. government as well. It's a very secure algorithm. On top of that, not only is it secure, it's much less resource intensive than 3DES. It takes much less time than 3DES does to actually perform the encryption. It's also very effective in low power devices or devices with not a lot of memory, like USB drives. So AES is very good for encrypting data at rest. It's a block cipher, and certain cipher modes allow it to be used as a stream cipher as well. And the current version of Transport Layer Security actually uses AES for encryption. So in the late 1990s, when NIST held that contest for a successor for DES, one of the algorithms that was submitted was Twofish. So Twofish was a rival for the Ringtail algorithm. Now, Twofish was not selected as an algorithm, but it's still a very excellent algorithm that supports block size of 128 and 256 bits. The creator of Twofish, a man by the name of Bruce Schneier, also created Blowfish. Blowfish is a symmetric key algorithm that support key sizes from 32 to 448 bits. And Bruce decided to keep this algorithm as open source to make it available to the public and free to use. So anyone can download and apply Blowfish, and that's why you find Blowfish as the standard or the encryption algorithm used oftentimes in Linux devices. In many Linux distributions, Blowfish comes standard, and you can freely use it. You can use it with any device. Again, it's open source. You can find it, find the means to apply Blowfish through the internet. It's made readily available. So Blowfish is an excellent alternative to AES if you don't want to use AES. Blowfish is a very strong cipher as well, and again, it's a block cipher. So good for pieces of data in which you know the exact size, like files and folders. Now we talk about some stream ciphers. Remember, stream ciphers are used for streaming data or any data in which the size is unknown, the exact size is unknown, or data that is sent in transit. Mostly like streaming video, streaming music nowadays. So Rivest Cipher 4, or RC4, it's a very common stream cipher. It was developed in 1987, and it was named for Ron Rivest. RC4 is a proprietary algorithm of the RSA data security. Well, it was until it was leaked. There was a leak where the code was released to the public, and now RC4 is widely used, but it goes under a different name. It's mostly known as ARC4, ARC4, or ARC4. And people use those names to avoid the trademark of RC4, but it's the same algorithm. So RC4 is very fast, it's very efficient, and that's why it's grown in popularity, and the fact that ARC4 is open source now means that it's widely used. It can be used by anyone. Transport layer security used RC4 for a number of years until TLS eventually transitioned to using AES as a stream cipher. So Transport layer security was a user of RC4, but RC4 has there's some vulnerabilities that have been found within RC4 in recent years. One of which means that it has a low diffusion rate. Okay, diffusion means that small changes in plain text lead to large changes in cipher text. So with RC4, even if there's small changes in the plain text, it doesn't necessarily mean to a drastic change in the cipher text, and attackers can use that to guess or determine the encryption mechanisms used within RC4 and try and conduct attacks against that. It also has some other vulnerabilities, so because of that, RC4 has been replaced, at least within transport layer security, with AES. RC4 was also used with WEP, or wired equivalent privacy. And WEP, as we know, is very unsecure, and it's one of the main reasons why WEP is no longer used and why WEP is deprecated. So RC4, remember, it's has vulnerabilities. It used to be, it still is very popular in a lot of senses, but it has many vulnerabilities inherent in the algorithm. So now it's recommended that it's no longer used. All right, let's talk about the differences between ciphers. And if you have any questions, please feel free to ask. I'll be happy to answer any. Okay, so we have block and stream ciphers, and we have different cipher modes, okay? So block ciphers, as we talked about, encrypt data within fixed size blocks, usually 64 or 128-bit size blocks. So blocks are usually encoded one at a time, or they could be encoded in parallel, okay? But the data is broken out into those block sizes and then encrypted per block. Block ciphers are very good when the size of the data is known, like with stored files and folders. And as we've seen, many different encryption algorithms are used as block ciphers. Okay, like Advanced Encryption Standard, DES, and 3DES. Those are all block ciphers. AES can also be used as a stream cipher, which we'll talk about a little later. So when it comes to block ciphers, you have different cipher modes, one of which being electronic codebook, or ECB. ECB is a very simple cipher that acts just like a codebook. So if you think of a codebook, you'd have a piece of ciphertext, and then you'd have a book that you would reference, a physical book, that would tell you how to decrypt each piece of the ciphertext. Okay? So for a given piece of plain text, the same block of ciphertext is always produced. So with that codebook, if we say we use a substitution cipher, A is now G and E is now M. Okay? So if we write out a phrase, we would refer to the codebook and replace each letter with what was written in the codebook. You'd still have the same string of letters from the same size of your sentence, because you would just be substituting out each letter, and that's one of the main pieces or characteristics of ECB, electronic codebook. You have the same size message, basically, from plain text translated to ciphertext. With more advanced methods of encryption, a small change in the plain text would result into a large change in the ciphertext, and the two values, or the size, the string of characters from the plain text to string of characters in the ciphertext, won't necessarily be the same size. That's known as diffusion. A small change in plain text would lead to a great change in ciphertext. That would be an encryption algorithm that would have a high diffusion rate. So because of that restriction within ECB, it's definitely one of the flaws. And ECB is very fast, it's very easy, because you're usually just doing a straight substitution, but it can be very easy to hack. Okay? There's just not enough randomness when using ECB to create secure cipher modes. Next we go to cipher block chaining. And with cipher block chaining, cipher block chaining was designed to address the flaws you'd find in ECB. Cipher block chaining contains the word chaining, and what that means is that each block of text, or each block of ciphertext, is used to create the next block of ciphertext. So the blocks are encrypted in order, and each block is used to encrypt the next. Okay? So we've talked about XOR. XOR is when you take a series of bits, ones and zeros, and you combine them with another series of bits, another series of ones and zeros, and then you get a value after that. So for example, let's go over XOR real quick. If we have a series of bits 1, 0, 1, 1, and we combine that with 0, 0, 0, 0. 1, 0, 1, 1, let me write this out. So if we have 1, 0, 1, 1, okay, and then we have 0, 0, 0, 0. Please excuse my handwriting. In order to XOR those bits, any bit that is the same would be a 1. So we look and we see any bit that's the same. These are the same. And any bit that was different would be any bit that's the same is a 0, and any bit that is different is a 1. Okay. So if we were to do this same string of bits here, okay, so when they're different, they're a 1, and when they're the same, they're a 0. Okay, so different, different, or say we have another random string of bits, 1, 0, 0, 0, 1, and 1, 1, 0, 1, 0. Okay. If they're the same, it's a 0. If they're different, it's a 1. So as we see, they're different, 1, they're the same, 0, they're the same, 0, they're different, 1, and they're different, 1. So that's how you can XOR any two bits. And you may be asked to XOR two different strings on the exam. So what cipher block chaining does is that it takes the previous block, okay, the ciphertext created by the previous block, and then XORs it with the next block before encrypting it. So this adds randomness. It's a very secure method of creating encryption or creating ciphertext. But it means that each block is dependent on all the blocks before it. So the blocks have to be encrypted in order. And because of that, cipher block chaining can be vulnerable to pipeline delays, in which the blocks, basically there's a delay in the encryption process because you're waiting on every other block to be encrypted. So there's no parallel encryption here where multiple blocks are encrypted at once. The blocks are encrypted one at a time. Though it's still a block cipher. It sounds like a stream cipher, but it's not. It's a block cipher. Since with the first block you would have no reference block, you'd have no block to XOR with, you use a 64-bit initialization vector, and that replaces one of the blocks. So cipher block chaining uses 64-bit blocks, and the first block is replaced by an initialization vector of 64 bits. So if you want to visualize this, imagine you're combining sand, okay? And you'd start off with a jar of sand, you'd shake it up. That might represent your initialization vector. Then you'd add another color to that sand, and you'd shake that up. And then you would add another color, and you'd shake it up. And you'd add another color, and you'd shake it up. By the end, each color would represent a different block of data. By the end, you're going to have a very mixed jar of sand where the colors are all over the place. It's kind of a way to think about it. Because cipher block chaining has those problems with pipeline delays, counter mode was created more so to use a traditional block cipher and have it work like a stream cipher. So cipher block chaining is still a very secure encryption method, but there's other methods and we're going to talk about that use the same principles nearly of cipher block chaining, but allow the encryption process to occur in a much more efficient manner. Counter mode uses a block method like AES and allows it to function as a stream cipher. Okay, so it's called counter mode because the number of blocks are linked to a counter. So if you have like 20 blocks, you're going to have a counter that goes up from 1 to 20. So the counter is just that value that changes based on the number of plain text blocks you have. You have the same initialization vector used for each block, except that initialization vector is combined with the counter. So that's where you get some added randomness. And then that combination of initialization vector and counter are applied to each block. So counter mode acts, it performs a similar function to cipher block chaining. It adds the randomness that cipher block chaining does, but counter mode can be used to encrypt blocks simultaneously. Okay, so you're not going to be subject to those pipeline delays we were talking about with cipher block chaining when you use counter mode. Counter mode is very good for parallel processors or multi-core processors because each core can be doing a different encryption at the same time. You can encrypt multiple blocks at once, which makes the encryption process much faster. So counter mode is a very good tool to speed up the encryption process. And because of these, the combination of technologies, counter mode can be used as a stream cipher. So this is how you get AES used with transport layer security. Something you would think would need a stream cipher, you can use counter mode to have a block cipher function as a stream cipher. So that's going to wrap up our study session just now. I want to take a moment and show you our course we have available right now at Cybercraft. If you're interested in learning more, we perform weekly study sessions like this. I'm usually on this channel right here. But if you ever miss a study session, you can go to our site and find an archive of it. And here at Cybercraft, we offer a full Security Plus course that covers all 6 domains. It's an extensive course with over 200 lessons, over 25 hours of recorded video, 2 practice quizzes per domain. So you're going to have 12 quizzes tailored for each domain, 2 quizzes per domain. That's 20 questions apiece per quiz. So you're going to have 40 questions per domain. And then we have 3 full practice exams at the end of the course that'll give you ample preparation to prepare you to take that exam and pass on the first attempt. So this course is, it's exactly what you need to pass on the first attempt, start earning that $85,000 per year salary. And when you take the course, you have live support throughout the course. If you have any questions throughout the course, you can feel free to contact the instructor. I'm the instructor for this course, and I will answer your questions as you go through the course. We do these weekly study sessions, and you have all the support you need. So you're not alone when you take the course. It's not like other sites where you buy a video course and then you just watch the course. You don't have any interaction. With this course, you have interaction with me. Anytime you need to ask questions, you can just email me and we can talk through any trouble spots you might have. This course is 40 hours of content. When you devote 40 hours to the course, you are going to pass. And if you don't pass, you get your money back 100%. In fact, if you are not happy with the course for any reason, within 14 days, you get your money back guaranteed. So, highly recommend you check out our Security Plus full course. It's our latest course. Here we have Cybercraft. It's updated for this year with all the content, with this year's CompTIA updates. So, Security Plus course, if you don't know, changes periodically, usually every year or every 2 years. And our course has all the latest material, everything that you need to know to pass the exam on the first attempt. But thanks for taking the time to join me with the study session. I hope you got something out of it, and I'll see you soon.